he was so humble that he would even go to prisons, washing the prisoners' feet.
Wow.
And I think the quarters that he was given as a bishop, he gave all that up and moved to a smaller place.
I think one of the memorable things that I've read he did was when he invited the South Sudanese leaders into the Vatican, and he literally bent down and kissed their feet.
Can you imagine going in the middle of a war?
I think it's tremendous. It's really tremendous.
But at the end of the day, I think it's still that belief that Jesus Christ died on the cross, rose on the third day, and he did all that so that we could be saved from our sins. So that's really interesting. Like having these people who dedicate their life to improving the livelihood of others, either through education, health.
And out of that area, there was like gushing, like spring of water, and that's where they go to do the sacrifice. There were stories that there lived a huge snake in that spring. And even so, when they need a rain, they go sacrifice, and crazy enough, it will rain. It started raining.
I think one for me, one experience that was really different from what I was used to back home is back home when we had the services or the church services, like they were really lively. People would really dance a lot, really move a lot, and the music was, and people could take their time.
And I think at the end of the day is the belief, who are you dancing for? If you're dancing and even dancing crazy, but you are dancing for the Lord, doing it with no shame, the glory goes to God. I feel like losing our identity is losing our identity. Can you imagine the whole of Africa under one president, under one Air Force, under one Army, under one Navy? And that would be massive. I think it's just because we want to see a better Africa. Because if Africa succeeds, believe me, we are also successful. Family and friends, welcome to today's episode. I want to start off by giving a shout out to our very first guest, Salia and Michaela. Salia is from Congo and Michaela from Burkina Faso. They were the very first guests. My guest of today, my friend and a brother, no other but Jenga. Yeah, karibu Jenga. Unaweza jintroduce tu kidogo?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. I think we've been planning to have this for the longest time, and maybe I was waiting for the summer sun to finally come here. But yeah, thanks for having me. As my brother said, I'm known by Jenga. Jenga is my middle name, but I'm Brian Jenga, resident of Grand Rapids, Michigan, but my home country is Kenya, from a hometown, which is about 2 hours away from Nairobi, Kenya, called Nakuru. Yeah, that's about it.
Karibu sana to the show, Safiri Podcast.
Thank you.
Where we speak all things diaspora, our conversations about our experiences here in America.
Yes.
And I know when we moved here, we had our beliefs back home. We moved here, different experiences. But today we wanted to focus actually looking at where the origin of Christianity came from. But before that, we just said that the Pope passed away. Yeah, the burial was on Saturday, I think, or?
Yes, I think so, yeah.
So pretty recent. So I just want us to say that I think this was a unique Pope.
Oh, yes, he was.
Like you look at his history and the things that he has stood for, I feel like in one way it was controversial, but also you look at the things that I think he changed the Catholic Church to a degree. Would you agree?
He really pushed on some of the norms that the Catholic Church has always believed in. He was not like more of the traditionalist when you think about it. Like he was very forward thinking.
Yes.
For most of the policies that he pushed in the church, yes.
Yeah, and when I was looking at his history, like most of his life was like a very humble beginning.
Yeah, because I think I read a little bit about his history, and I think he's from Argentina.
Yes.
And he grew up during I think there was a political turmoil during the time that he grew up in Argentina. And I think when there was a part where they were saying that when he became the bishop, he was so humble that he would even go to prisons, washing the prisoners' feet.
Wow.
And I think the quarters that he was given as a bishop, he gave all that up and moved to a smaller place. Like he was not after material gain. He lived what he preached.
Yes, yes. So it's like a living like example. And it gotta be that maybe humble beginning, because that time probably, I think it was born in 1930 something. So it was like a long time ago. Colonization was still taking place in Africa and maybe to some parts of South America, I'm pretty sure. And so I think it maybe growing through that period, I'm pretty sure it did influence a lot about maybe his policies. But even talking specifically like about Africa, I think he was a big champion for peace.
Yes.
In Africa. He went to Central Africa Republic.
Oh, okay.
And that time he was in the middle of a conflict, but he still went.
Which goes back to what we said initially, like he was forward thinking, like he was not any stereotypical pope before him. Yeah, you're so right. Can you imagine going in the middle of a war?
I think it's tremendous. It's really tremendous. Yeah. So I think he had a very good reputation. And as we said, I think it, in a way, it transformed the Catholic Church.
Yes. And I think I also share this with you. The other thing I read too is there was during the election of the second Pope who was going to replace George Paul II. During that voting, he was the second runners-up. And because he didn't want it to take so long, he said that, no, it's okay. Can we all just vote for Benedict? Because that was the Pope who came. Yeah. So how many leaders would do that?
Very few.
Yes. So it just goes to show how humble he was.
Yes. He was also an advocate for refugees, and he condemned exploitation of African minerals. And so I think that was a good gesture. And I think the Pope has a lot of power and a lot of say to the global politics.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So rest in peace.
R.I.P. Yeah, he will be missed.
Yeah, Christianity. Yes. I'm a Christian, now born again Christian. I don't know about you, Jenga.
Oh yeah, I'm a born again Christian. I think for me, when I talk about my journey in this belief in Jesus Christ, I always like to start by saying that when I was born, I was raised in a Catholic church.
Yes.
And shout out to my grandma. She was like a big role model for me when it came to religion. And most of my upbringing, I spent most of my time through catechism classes.
Yes.
So we would learn all these prayers, Hail Marys, and it really shaped a lot, like my upbringing. You are learning about the 10 Commandments. You should not kill. You should so. Yeah, Christianity really had a huge impact on my upbringing. And over the years, I think when I transitioned to the States, that's when I moved a little bit away from the Catholic Church. So these days, I think I say I'm more of a Protestant. But at the end of the day, I think it's still that belief that Jesus Christ died on the cross, rose on the third day, and he did all that so that we could be saved from our sins. Yeah.
Amen.
I believe I've been a Christian all my life.
Yes, yes. Fact about me, I don't know if you know about it, but do you know that I did take catechism in Catholic?
Yeah, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yes. So I was dating this one girl. She's Catholic. And, I was willing to explore the faith.
Yes.
And I know she wanted to be a Protestant. But I thought I would also look into what is actually Catholic belief is. And so I did take the catechism classes.
Oh, wow. All through? Because they usually take years.
So I took for 1 year. Okay. It was like a one sentiment of it. But now, after that, I was hoping that would give me a good overview of what the Catholic Church is.
Yes.
And if I want to commit my life fully to it. So then if I was going to go to the next step, then that I would love to be fully committed.
Okay.
And that's when, obviously, I did not continue because I'm still going to Protestant. But it was a good experience. I just had a lot of questions for the instructor. And he was very gracious answering those.
Wow, that is very interesting. I didn't know about that. So you were able to even learn about the Hail Mary, the prayers?
Yes.
Okay.
I forgot most of it. Let's talk about Christianity in Africa.
Yes.
A lot of times I think we say that Christianity was brought to Africa by missionaries. We know that the Christianity was even there longer before the missionaries.
I think there's one, and we talked a little bit about this. Yes. There's a mention in the Bible actually of an African in the New Testament, the Ethiopian eunuch.
Yes.
Yeah. And that just shows that already, even during the early church, Africa was also connected to Christianity.
With the Christianity, yes. Yeah, because I know, the belief Philip was one of the apostles of Jesus. He's the one who converted that Ethiopian eunuch into Christianity. And I think that's the first recorded case of an African being converted to Christianity.
Yes.
But also, the guy who helped Jesus with the cross, he said it was a black person.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, it was like of African origin.
Yes.
I have to dig deeper onto that. But he might have been a black person. If he was black, which means he could potentially have been of either from Africa.
Yes.
But maybe that's something to investigate more. But there's also like with Ethiopia.
Yes.
There's also like Egypt, which is in the Bible, almost throughout the Bible.
Oh, yes.
Like Genesis.
Yeah, even from the time they mentioned that Joseph, when he was fearing that Jesus was to be killed before he was born, remember when in his dream, the angel directed him to run to Egypt.
Egypt, yes.
Yeah, that just shows that there is a connection. Africa has always been there.
That has always been there, yes. And so it was like Joseph as well, when he ran from his place to Egypt and becoming a manager at the Pharaoh palace. And so when I was doing a little bit of research too, it says that there's a city in Egypt called Alexandria. I don't know if the city still exists or is an ancient city. It probably still does. But it was one of the places where also Christianity was established around like 42 AD. That was in Egypt. And then not just Egypt, but also Libya. And also Libya is mentioned a lot in the Bible.
Oh, wow.
And so is Algeria and Tunisia.
Okay.
It was one of the like major centers of Christianity. So basically they had like schools of Christianity. So you'll have like philosophers or people who like think deep into faith.
Yes.
Yeah. I guess in today's we can say maybe, I don't know if they're seminaries of today, but
okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting that you're saying that, because most of those countries that you're mentioning, when you look at them today, the main religion in those areas is Muslim.
Yes.
Yeah, they're mainly Islamic states.
Yes. Which is, that's a good point. And then you wonder like at what point.
Yes. Did the shift happen?
The shift happened.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Then I think there's also the other mention of when you think about when the Orthodox Church in Ethiopia was started.
Yes.
I think the last time I checked that, I say talked of 4 AD. So it seems like Christianity has always been in Africa.
Yes.
And I was actually wondering, because Kenya is south of Ethiopia, and Kenya, the first time that the missionaries brought the Christianity to Kenya, I think it was 1498 when they talk of Vasco da Gama. So like we were just south of Ethiopia, and Ethiopia had always had this well-established church, but there was never that transition of Christianity. And the point I want to raise with this is, so as much as Christianity was in Africa, it was in pockets, and the spread of it was not as wide as maybe the early church in Middle East.
In the Middle East, yes. Which is interesting that it seems like also there was like I guess part of the missionaries did reach, not missionaries, but the apostles did reach the Europeans. But I also read that I believe it was an Ethiopian, they are the first people who came up with the monastic movement, whereby you have people like monks and nuns who choose now to dedicate their life into just the life of spiritual life, or dedicating their life to the Creator, to serving the Creator. They choose to be celibacy, live like a low class kind of a life, and just to serve people. So that's interesting.
But yeah, like it's really interesting that it actually started in Ethiopia, because I know back in Kenya, a lot of schools are ran by the nuns, the brothers. So like in Kenya, because that's where I'm from, that's most of what I know, there's a huge effect or influence of the churches or the religion to the schools, even hospitals. There are even hospitals that are set up by missionaries or the church and maintained by the church. So that's really interesting. Like having these people who dedicate their life to improving the livelihood of others, either through education, health. So yeah, Christianity definitely has a huge impact on people's overall well-being.
Yes. You mentioned that, it reminds me growing up. In our city, Matu, we had 2 hospitals. There was the General Hospital by the government, and there was a Catholic hospital. So the Catholic hospital, we used to call it my sisters, basically from the word sister.
Yes.
So you ask her, where did you go? Kwa my sisters.
Kwa my sisters. Yes.
And the impact of that church, we knew the the Catholic hospital there in that city actually offered better services than the government one. And so even people preferred that to go there for the for medical services.
Yes. Yeah. Because even when you talk about now that you've actually reminded me, in my grandma's hometown, Molo, there's one of the very well-known girls' school, high school, that performs really well. It's also ran fully by nuns.
Yes.
Yeah. And best quality education. And I know there's also a lot of church schools that are also ran by. So, yes. I think when they dedicate their lives to serving in that ministry, whether it's in education, in church, they really dedicate themselves.
Yeah, I totally agree. Something else I want to mention before even we move from this topic about Christianity. And I also doing research. Apparently, I read that the whole thing of Trinity is actually originated from Africa.
Oh, the Holy Trinity?
Holy Trinity.
Oh, okay.
There was like an African scholar, I believe was from Ethiopia as well, Ethiopia or Egypt. They are the first people, or the first person, he was a scholar, to use the word Trinity to refer to the three God in one.
Yes.
So I thought that was also interesting.
Wow.
I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, you also didn't know that. Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of theological development also in Africa.
Yes.
Around Christianity.
Yes.
Wow.
So we may have like, if you look at like the southern of Africa, it doesn't seem, at least from the history that I've read a little bit, was a majority of us was in the north, which kind of makes sense because you have Israel there and Palestine, which are the countries that where Jesus roamed most of his life, and where the missionaries were originated from. And I don't know if it's like the size of Africa that they couldn't go all the way to the southern or exactly what it is, but you raised a good question. Ethiopia is there. We are south of Ethiopia. Yet, I think Kenya was mostly traditionalist.
Yes.
Well, something that actually we can maybe talk about a little bit.
Oh, yeah. From the little I know, from the stories of my grandmother, my grandfather, they talk of back in the days, they had elders. And these elders, everything was set up around the elders. They could decide if somebody went against the norms of the tribe, they will be the ones to punish them. And in the Kikuyu tribe, I think we call it God, they believe that his seat was actually in Mount Kenya.
Mount Kenya, yes.
Yeah, and most of the people, when they would pray, facing Mount Kenya. And there was also a great reverence for the Mogumo tree.
Yes.
They also believed in specific people, I think they were called, who used herbs and things to treat people. So there was always that belief that there was a higher power that decided on whether there will be rain, whether the crops the land will produce from the. So yeah, there was, I think for the longest time as Africans, even before Christianity, we always had a belief in God. It's only that maybe we didn't believe in the actual God.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I think it's the same for the Kamba people too. I think for the Kikuyus was unique, facing the mountain to pray. For the Kamba, I'm not sure, but what I know is they did give sacrifices, and they would either kill a goat or a sheep. And a lot of it I saw it happen when there's like famine. There was the older men, possessed, will come, and then they'll set a date where they'll go to sacrifice. And in my village, there was another distant village whereby there was this place where there's a lot of trees. And out of that area, there was like gushing, like spring of water, And that's where they go to do the sacrifice. There were stories that there lived a huge snake in that spring. I don't think anybody have ever seen it.
Yes.
But I believe it was a place where it was not necessarily secured.
Okay.
But some of those stories that place was considered as holy. So those stories probably prevented people from going there. That would be my assumption.
So it was more of a shrine.
Yes, it was a shrine, yes. And my grandfather was one of those leaders. And even, so when they need a rain, they'll go sacrifice, and crazy enough, it will rain. It start raining.
Wow.
So you could see like the results, really. And then I also saw my grandfather, where there's an occurrence in a family or if we want to break a curse or for a blessing, I saw my grandmother, they'll make traditional brew.
Oh, okay.
Yes. And then they'll put it in a calabash, and then my grandfather would take it and he would start praying.
Yes.
And when he's praying, he'll mention all great parents. So he started with his father going backwards.
Yes.
And that tradition, it me reminded like when we pray, sometimes we say the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, when we start mentioning those. And it got me curious, like this acknowledgement of ancestors, it has some power or impact.
Yes.
So that was like what I observed with my grandfather.
Wow. And would you say that, like, when you hear those stories, do you feel like, I think, let me get to the question. So what I'm thinking is, do we still, as Africans, maybe have an effect from those beliefs, right? Even when we convert, most of us, because Kenya right now, it's like, it's mainly Christians.
Yes.
So do you still feel like maybe some of those beliefs, there's still some effects that they have on us, right?
I'm not 100% sure how to answer that question. So it's the question like, if I think that some of those practices still have an effect on us today?
Yes, maybe. Yeah, maybe. Oh, that's even another way of asking it. Yes. So yeah, whether they still have an effect, or maybe at the back of some of the people's minds, even though they are Christians, maybe there's still a small place that's still tied to those beliefs.
I think that if just personal opinion, people not have to agree with it. I think that first of all, we have to agree there's one thing of being born into something, and there's another thing being introduced to something. If you're born into a tradition, most likely it'll be so much hard to disconnect from that.
Yes.
Fully.
Yes.
And also when you adopt something, it's hard to adopt completely fully. And I say that is to say, even though I'm a Christian, sometimes I pray for the Holy Spirit to lead me to understand. But some of these things are based on another culture, the Jewish culture. And so when I read the Bible, sometimes there's disconnects because there are things that culturally are not on the Bible. They are there. So sometimes to understand the Bible fully, it's like you have to understand the culture of the people. And so the same way, if the Bible was based in my culture, I'll probably understand the Bible a lot more because I know where it's coming from and I know the behind stories. So with that to say that, yes, I do believe that some of the traditions are still believed in today. And to a degree, they still affect our lives, either in a positive or negative way.
Yes.
Even today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say I also agree with that because for the longest time, like I'll also give another example of the Catholic Church.
Yes.
For the longest time, the masses, when they would do the service, I think they call it the mass in Catholic. Most of the service in the beginning was done in, what's the language in
Latin?
Latin, yes. It was done in Latin. And I believe most people didn't understand Latin. It was just more of you cram the prayers and the progression of the mass, but you really don't relate with it. Then I don't know the year that they made the switch, but it reached a point where they accepted the Africans to also bring their own music. So most of the liturgical service songs were now done in African songs or themes, but still, of course, singing about God. But I think it had a better impact when they were able to integrate their own tradition or their own way of praising God in their own mother tongue.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think they even were able later on to translate the Bible to the native languages, which I think had a huge impact.
A huge impact, yes, exactly. It's the same point whereby you try to understand a Bible in a foreign language like English or Latin. There's no way you'll fully understand it.
Yes.
Because there are words like, let's say in Kikuyu, it's just one word. But that word, just for Kikuyu, is so much information behind it.
Yes.
So somebody needs to say that word. But for you as a Kikuyu, you know this. It's like a chain of things that it means. And you need to follow through if something you need to follow through. Now, if somebody was maybe from another tribe, let's say Minjikenda or Shona, and they learn that word, they will never understand it to the depth that you understand. Yeah.
Yes.
And so then that affects what depth you understand the word.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think when it comes to Christianity, being able to integrate the understanding of the theology and the message, the good news message, being able to integrate that with the African culture, I think it's a big thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think also, I don't know if you have ever, maybe this might be a little bit out of the topic, but just speaking of the Bible, sometimes there are times that I'll read the Bible.
Yes.
And I feel like there's a disconnect. And even if how much I try, I cannot understand it. So, for example, sometimes incurious can be bad, it can be good, and I'm one of those people.
Yes.
So, for example, the life of Jesus, we see Jesus being born, and already at the age of 12, he disappears. And he doesn't emerge again in the Bible until he's going to get, I think, baptized by John, around that area, when he's like this more than 10 years.
Because he was 30, I think, right?
Around 30 years.
Yes. So that's more than 15 years.
Yeah. That we don't know. But I do believe if his story was recorded from when he was little, when he was in the ministry, I'm pretty sure there are records in between. But they are not available.
Yes.
And that's why I got curious to read in these other books that were taken out of the Bible. And actually, I was reading one called like Something About the Life of Mary.
Okay.
And it actually gives you how Mary was born, his parents, and how actually is said to be a virgin. It actually explains how that came about, like being a virgin.
Okay.
And to being selected to carry Jesus. In fact, from what I read was from that book that his mom was barren. Her name was Hannah. And then an angel came and prophesied that, or gave her a word that she'll give birth to a girl. And that girl will have to be dedicated, will be given the name Mary and all of that details. And so when I read those, that makes sense. And I'm starting to make connections.
Yes.
I'm starting to make connection about the virginity of Mary, why it was important, how it came about. Like those backstories, when they miss, it becomes harder for sometimes.
For you to really relate with the message.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I think you're so right. Because, the books that we have in the current Bible, I don't think they're the exhaustive lists of books, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Of explaining especially about the life of Jesus Christ. There must be so many other books, but I think the Bible, the books that are there, they believe that those are enough to portray a message of, especially the gospel of how Jesus lived among us, right?
Yes.
Yeah, but most definitely, maybe there's also value in seeing those extra books. I think they call them the extra canonical books because, I also once in a while read some of them, like the book of Sirach.
Yes.
It's very close to Proverbs.
Yeah.
So it also has a lot of very similar message to Proverbs. But I think at the end of the day, it's always about a matter of praying that God and through the power of the Holy Spirit to still guide you to make sure that you're still reading His Word and understanding it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I think there's that sense of I like the way I work. At least in my work, there's when I feel an urge within my spirit, I like to explore it. And so if I'm not connected dots and I feel my spirit is leading me to read let's say the book of Tobit, which is not in the Protestant Bible, I'll go read it. What harm does it do to me to read in it? It's better to understand, to read than not to have the knowledge.
Yes.
But then you have people who say that, no, like they were taken out, you shouldn't read them. Trust in a spirit to lead you. But also I think God has given us the mind and the wisdom to sometimes choose and what we want to do. So if somebody's convicted to read those canonical books, I don't think anybody should judge them. Yeah,
you're right. I think you should still test them by the word in the books that are accepted and test this word. If there's contradictions between those and the current one, then maybe don't follow it, don't take it. But if it's still in line with God's word, then you're right.
So let's going back to the African traditional belief and even offerings and sacrifices. To a degree, I would say that I feel like those traditions have been super demonized. And I've always been curious, like, were they really that demonic?
Personally, I think I'm one of those people who maybe think of it like how you're saying it, demonized. Because think about it, they didn't know about God, about Yahweh.
Yes.
So when they were doing these sacrifices in these shrines, which God were they sacrificing to? Because we know there's only one God as Christians. So I think that's the part where I agree to some extent with those people who demonize it.
Yes.
But To some extent, again, I can't 100% say that because it's an unknown. I'm not really sure. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's true. We don't know exactly what kind of God they were believing in. If it's the true God, the Yahweh, or it was something else. If it was something else, then it's definitely demonic because there's only one God.
Yes.
I like to say I have some level of passion for Africa. And when I came to America, I think I started questioning a lot of things. Because I came here and then I realized that people here embrace their country and their cultures. Look at the Irish people. These guys, they are constantly celebrating their culture.
Yes.
Look at the Dutch people. You go to Holland, they are wearing those shoes that look like from Genie or Demonic.
The wooden shoes?
Yes. If you look at old Kenyan kids, a demon will be wearing that kind of a shoe, but they are here celebrating it. But then everything else that we believed in, even the dances, like in Kamba, we had what we call kinze.
Okay.
And which was like basically mostly by ladies. And there's another one called Kilume. That one I feel like it was kind of demonic.
Yes.
Because it involved like witch doctors.
Oh.
And people would dance until they fall in trance.
Wow.
So like literally like it was super spiritual. So that one I can say, yes.
That one you're like, no, yeah, this one, as much as I don't like demon, yeah, this one is.
Yes. Yeah. Because the witch doctor would be in the center of that festival like that. It will only be in like a rounded hat.
Wow.
Round in shape. And they dance. They have fire in the middle and they dance. And they can dance, even walk on fire and not get burned. And they'll dance the whole day. And yes, I say a lot of them will fall in trance. In Kikamba, they use this term, this is where you dance until it's like you are not yourself. Something has possessed you.
Yes.
Now, we know in the Bible, David danced crazily. But, man, I don't know. That definitely is demonic.
Yes. Yeah. It's really hard to say for certain because I think at the heart of it is even today when we are singing and dancing for the Lord,
yes.
In your heart, you're dancing for the Lord, right? I think at the heart of it is what's in that person's heart, right? Like
yes.
So in the tradition, if they didn't know God, which goes back to the point I raised, then
yes.
I think it's really right to say it's demonic because they didn't know God. So which God were they dancing to? Yeah. But one thing, because you mentioned about the difference in experience when you came to the United States, I think one for me, one experience that was really different from what I was used to back home is back home when we had the services or the church services, like they were really lively. People would really dance a lot, really move a lot, and the music was, and people could take their time. Yes. Some of the services could go up to 3 hours. 3-hour service, you can imagine, you go from 9 up
to 12 years.
Yes. Then I remember coming here, the first service I went to, I think it only took 1 hour. And most of the music, very brief, very short.
Yeah.
Because I think in the Western world, they're really time conscious. It's all about the service is 1 hour, it should only take 1 hour. So I think as much as there's in our culture, I think there's that thing where we really, when we believe in something, we really like being passionate about it.
Passionate about it.
Yeah. So if it's dancing for the Lord, people really give their all when they're doing it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's important. Like that's where like the clash between culture and Christianity. And like you say, like in Africa, we dance. Africans just want to dance. And I think that at the end of the day is the belief, who are you dancing for? If you're dancing and even dancing crazy, but you are dancing for the Lord, doing it with no shame, the glory goes to God. Because I really believe that the devil has not invented anything. He has just counterfeit for everything. And so there is an element of us as African having to understand, not to lose our culture. You start like eroding little things. It just is like snowballs.
Yes.
And that's where you end up even like people losing their languages. Whereby like right now, if you go to Kenya, I talk to my niece. Little girl, she lives in Oshago, but she doesn't know any Kikamba.
So it's either Swahili or English?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. Like if I speak in Kamba, she'll hear and respond in Swahili. And I'm telling her, nope, I want you to speak. So that's like erosion of the culture over the generation. And
because I think for the services, at least for me, you're so right. Like sometimes when you hear, I don't know for you, but for me, sometimes when a service is in our either Swahili or the mother tongue,
yes,
I usually feel more connected. I feel like, wow, like I can really connect to the message, and it's more impactful than when you're maybe listening to only English service.
Yes.
Yeah, you're so right. Like maybe we need as a culture, even when we move to the States, if it's Christianity, like still maintaining that culture. If it's the language, still making sure that some of the services you're doing them in Swahili or Hausa or wherever you are from Africa, that maintaining that language even when you're here, which I know it's really hard. You really have to be intentional with it because I think there's something that it brings.
Oh, there is. And one time I went to a school and the kids were during their play, they were playing like songs like this one of American artists. Maybe, who can I say? Maybe Katy Perry, Shakira. I don't know if Shakira is American, but like Shakira, like those songs, popular artists. A lot of these artists, obviously the artists that are not necessarily casting in the songs, but they're American songs. But there's an element whereby, and this is the difference, I think, a culture clash between America and Africa, whereby in Africa, if you are Christian, you'll find like a lot of the songs, you don't want to even listen to them, unless they're spiritual songs. For example, in my culture, you have the Kamba music. You know how they playing guitar a very specific way.
Yes.
When you listen, you can say, that's Kamba.
That's Kamba, yes.
Yes. And it's been gone for generation. But I think we still, a lot of times, we still see it as very ungodly.
Oh, so like when, let's say you are singing a Christian song, so when you play the guitar in that style,
in that tune, yes,
then people are like, no, this is no longer Christian.
Yes. But I have to acknowledge that the people like Congolese, they do a better job. They still play Lingala and they dance for Christ. But also people like these other big artists from Congo, they play like regular music in the same beats and style.
Yes. I see. I think I'm finally coming to the point you're raising.
Yeah.
So there's, for us as Africans, like our way, our style of music, maybe our dress code, there's a way that it was demonized, right?
Yes, exactly. That's what I'm trying to say. Yes.
Yeah, but you still feel like there's a way that we can still maintain some of that culture and still worship Yahweh, right?
Yes.
And the example you used with the Congolese, that's when I finally got the light bulb, right? Yeah. Like Lingala music, Christian music is really popular. Yes. And people don't see it as, they don't demonize it. They see it's Lingala, but it's God's music, it's Christian music. So you also feel we should be doing the same even with most of our...
Yes. Because believe me, like when you come listen to the Kikuyu, there's a particular way they play their instruments. Because they're Kikuyus and you can identify their style. That's a Kikuyu. This is a Kalenjin. This is a Kamba. When you just hear the tune. But then it gets narrowed. Oh, we cannot bring that to church.
Yes.
We cannot bring that to church. That's part of why I struggle with the whole identity crisis, I guess, in my case. Just going back, like when I said, these people are preaching in Latin, reading in Latin, catechism in Latin. And then later on they came to switch out. Now it's okay to do it in Kikuyu, in Kamba, in Kalenjin, in Swahili. So what changed all of a sudden? I don't know.
Yeah. And this is just me speaking. I'm not even sure that this is accurate.
Yeah.
But I feel, and it's really sad, there's also an element of colonization when it comes to Christianity. To some extent, I feel like the colonialists, they somewhat used it to gain control. And maybe the missionaries, maybe when they were bringing the religion, the spreading of the gospel, the good news, they were really intentional and they really had the best interests of the Africans at heart. But I believe that colonialists who wanted to come and gain control of us so that they could exploit the resources, whether it's land, whether it's minerals, they also had their own agenda. And I feel to some extent they maybe had a hand to play in influencing how we perceived even ourselves by maybe showing that, oh, like the way you dress, the way your music, it's not the best, it's demonic. It maybe helped them to some extent to gain control over us.
Yes. I think I'm solo. If I sell my culture to you and you embrace it fully, then that means you embrace my ideologies.
Yes.
So if you embrace my ideologies, most likely it's easy to manipulate it's easy to control the whole, this, I manage this means this way, just so that it can favor my way. And I think maybe this way we can use as some experts.
Yes. Oh, definitely. Yeah.
I wish we can get like somebody and just give us like some of these insights.
Yeah. Somebody who's really studied theology, and
yes,
I think it's a match between the theology and the history.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. You're very right. Yeah. Because I know that even back then, most of the people who are educated, because back then education was a luxury. Not everybody could make it to go to school. Most of the first people who used to go to school, even our first president, I think they started off by going to mission schools.
Yes.
So there's a huge influence that the Christianity had in how people perceive their culture and how they even ended up, the ideologies that they took, and how it even changed how they would dress, how they would do everything in their lives.
Yeah. And then even I think take this to different angles, because I think there's a lot of conflict. Even let's talk about the African medicine, whereby when I was growing up, I knew if I had this kind of a sickness, which kind of herbs I'll go to the forest and get. If I had a stomachache and I'm at school, right, most likely I'm not going to be able to run home and get medicine. I knew I can go to a guava tree, take the leaves, chew it. It's bitter, but that will clear the stomachache immediately. If I'm bleeding, I cut myself somewhere. I knew the particular herb that I can chew if I don't have access to water, and just put it in that, and it will stop the bleeding. And now you have the modern medicine come in, and now everything like African and herbs, don't even think about it. We have a better solution.
And the funny thing is, we're actually going back to it to some extent.
Yes, to some extent, we are going back to it.
Yeah, like this thing of organic.
Yes.
Yeah, there's this thing of, these days you have to check what you're eating.
Yes.
It really affects your health. So it seems like you're so right. Like most of that knowledge that was really demonized is, to some extent, the modern medicine is also taking some research to learn some things from it. Like the aloe vera plant, the medicinal purposes it has, all these plants. And this is knowledge that was there with our forefathers.
Yes.
How they would treat them. Yeah.
Different, yes. And one of the things I think is a downside for us Africans, maybe when we can do better, is documenting our history. I think that's the area that we are falling short.
Yes.
Like we need to be able to document our knowledge.
Yes.
Because now the knowledge about the traditional medicine and herbs, majority of our great-grandparents, they passed away, and a lot of them passed away with that knowledge. Just imagine if it was like documented in some ways. I know the way we used to pass knowledge is by teaching the newer generation. But at some point, I just wish that we can be more active in actually putting things in read.
Yes. Like you're mentioning about the herbs. I'm also, when you were saying that, I was also thinking like even having movies that show some of these major events in Africa. The arrival of the colonialists, maybe how in the Kamba community, in the Kikuyu community, just to have that exposure of understanding how they lived, how it was. Yeah, that you're so right. Like even if it's through research papers or through movies, that documentation aspect. Of that, because there's a lot of lost history.
There's a lot of history and it gets lost. We have to give the credit to the West. I think they do a better job with that. But I also know like during the colonialism, a lot of our history was destroyed in ways maybe that we used to document either through artifacts and such things. Probably colonials also did a big damage onto that.
Yeah, one thing I know is, and this is something I've seen through documentaries, they usually show how, at least from the Kikuyu community, most of the Kikuyus were moved to what they would call detention centers, because the land that the Kikuyu community had was in the highlands, so the temperature was really cool. And for the colonialists, who most of them are from Europe, they really liked that temperature climate because it reminded them of the climate they had back home. And then the land was really fertile. They could grow most of the food, cash crops and all that. So a majority of the Kikuyu community, their land was taken. Then they were pushed into detention camps. And there's still a lot of effects up to date that came from that. The trauma. You can imagine your land being taken, your kids, your family, some of them being killed due to that aggression, and being pushed in a camping site and still working for free on the farms of your oppressor. So there's a lot of trauma that comes with that. And I think it also affects the perception of some of the Africans about Christianity. They think the same religion of the oppressor, because now they perceive, because the white man is the one who brought the religion. You're still telling me to still believe in the same religion of the same person who was oppressing me. Yeah.
It becomes extremely tricky, because with all that trauma, a lot of the property is damaged, a lot of property is taken. And then even after the colonial ended, it was not even returned to the original people. It's either like those colonials still stayed as settlers.
Yes.
I heard you go to Nakuru, there are so many of them.
Yeah. The one I know is Lord Delamere.
Yes.
But I'm not sure. I think the lease ended. On your way is in Naivasha.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a huge tract of land. I think they used to farm pineapples, all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was still owned by a white settler's family.
But like you can imagine, you look in the case of South Africa, whereby you have 70% of the land is owned by the minority settlers, white people. And then you have 30% owned by the majority.
Yes.
The 30% owned by the Africans, who are the majority.
Yes.
But then 70% of the land is owned by 8% of the population.
Wow.
When you have those disparities, a problem. So these people, they saw it get taken away. And now, even after that, they got their independence, and still this many years, still they can't have what they rightly belongs to them.
Yeah. It's so sad.
Yeah.
It still goes back to, as a continent, Africa. I think that's one of the biggest things that brings us back as a continent, that we as the African people, we never really get to enjoy the benefits of our resources. Most of the resources are owned by the few.
Yes.
Yeah. And the few are the ones who enjoy the benefits, who are able to reap from them. But the majority of the people, they're in abject poverty.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Some of these places, when you go to some of the places, it's just so sad.
Yes.
Yeah, people don't have access to clean water. Food is an issue.
Yeah.
Especially in the semi-arid area, because they really depend on rain, and it doesn't rain that much.
Yeah.
It's so saddening. And it's not that most of these African countries don't have the resources. The resources are there. It's just that they're being used by the few.
By the few, yeah.
Yeah.
Or some external powers.
Yes.
Yeah, and I had a brother who used to work somewhere in Kikuyu land. I don't know if it was Nyeri or somewhere in Central. But one of the things you mentioned, that people don't own big pieces of land. It's like they are really crammed together. And Central is one of the places with so many people. We call it Watu wa Mlima, like this. Even politicians know.
Yes.
If you want to pass, you gotta make sure the Kikuyus are on your side.
Yes.
But then on this other end, you have Kenyatta. People of your tribe, of the Kikuyu people, only the majority of the land.
Yes.
That their own people are so squeezed, they have to share such a small piece of land.
Yes. And you can imagine the small land that they own, sometimes 250, that's like a quarter of an acre.
Yes.
And for some of these, so let's say it's you who has the quarter of an acre, then you get 4 kids. Those 4 kids will inherit that land, that quarter of an acre.
Yeah.
And when maybe you pass on, you leave it to them as inheritance. They'll again split the quarter,
yes.
4 times. You can imagine how bad it is. And for some of these communities, especially in central Kenya, most of them are farmers.
Yes.
They live off of the land.
Yeah.
They depend on the land. That's where they get their food. That's where they raise, for some of them, keep cattle, for meal. So, the land is their life.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah, some of these things will have to change, and I pray that our leaders, as African leaders, will have a change of behavior. I'm particularly encouraged by what is happening in Burkina Faso. I watched Wondemeyer video he did, and he was on the ground in Burkina Faso, and he was showing these trucks making new roads. Since independence, which was in 1960, they had only paved 3,000 miles of road. And now, with the current president, they are aiming to pave 5,000 miles. And this is not just for, imagine since independence and now, definitely these 5,000 miles. They're not planning to build for that many years.
Oh,
It's
yes.
something that will probably take 2 years, 3 years. And I think that's one of the cases that is encouraging in Kenya, Kibaki.
Yes.
Sure, that it can be done.
Yes. I remember during that period in Kibaki's time, life was good.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember going to this shop with 100 shillings, and with 100 I could get a loaf of bread, milk, and meat.
Yes.
I think a quarter or something, and still get change.
Yeah.
So life was really affordable, and I think he also did a lot of work, like in rural electrification.
Yes.
Most of the rural areas, the light that they have right now, the electricity connection, like it was during that time.
It was during that time, yeah. So Kibaki went into power. When was that? Are you able to go?
Yeah, let me check. I think I'm guessing it's 202, but let me confirm. 2002.
202, yeah. Yeah, but Kibaki made a big difference in Kenya. Like they just wish President wengine wamekuja wangefanya.
Yeah, being selfless, being like because when he got into office, his main aim was not to profit his family or amass wealth. It was to develop the country. Another big thing I remember during his reign that really up to date, we still feel the effect, is when he made primary education free.
Oh, yes.
And during that time, I remember there was also this campaign of the girl child being pushed to go to school too. Because I remember like a lot of the families will not prioritize the education of the girl child.
Of the girl child, yes.
Yeah, and during that time, he really pushed for that.
And even it came with so much benefits because even with the current awareness Kenyans have right now is because a lot of people got to go to school during Kibaki time. And that time, obviously, the more people are educated, because people are able to access education, then you have people who can think for themselves.
Yes.
And usually like stories are set books.
Oh,
they are really like eye-opening.
Yeah, but most of the set books were around revolution,
yes,
leadership, good governance, bad governance.
Yeah. There's one more thing I want to look at us, and this kind of us taking us back a little to the Bible.
Yes.
And this could be maybe the last thing, unless you have something else for us to talk about.
Okay. Hit it. Let's go.
Let me clear my throat.
Yeah.
Is when people look at, and this is all again about the culture, when people look at people who grow long hair, like dreads, a lot of times we see them in a negative light. And I don't know if it's because in the high schools, primary schools, we are forced to shave our heads, but somehow like a lot of those people get demonized. Even I have these stereotypes when I see somebody with long hair of a black person. I'm thinking twice. Like if I see a pastor preaching in a pulpit with like dreads, I'm thinking like, doesn't seem right.
Yes. It takes you time to even listen to the message before you can. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. But then you read the Bible. You read the Judges, the story of Samson. I may never seen a razor until he got shaved by Delilah,
yeah.
And so Samuel never got shaved. So he had like long hair and dreads. So you can imagine if Samuel went from not being shaved since he was born until he died. Can you imagine how long that hair was?
That's a lot. Yeah, very long.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't even know that, but yeah, you're so right.
Yes. The Samuel was never shaved.
Because he was dedicated to serve with Eli in the temple.
Yes.
So I'm guessing this was like a cultural thing. When you serve in the temple, you have to still maintain your purity or something. Yeah.
Yes. I think it was part of the covenant between Anna and God that she promised he will never see a razor on his head.
Okay.
That was part of why. Is it just me? Or do you feel the same? If you see a preacher who has dreads, do you just think it's just kawaida?
Yeah, I think this ties back to the conversation we had earlier on of our culture being demonized, right?
Yeah.
Like the way we dress, our music, our style of music. Now it even goes back to even our hair, right?
Yes.
Oh, like when you leave your hair in the natural way, it's perceived as unprofessional.
Yes.
Or like you can't be trusted. And even I think in the Western world, especially if you get into corporate, like a lot of people, for the black people, they prefer shaving to look more of a professional. But yeah, you're so right. Like, of course, I would tend to say that no, I don't have that stereotype, but no, I think you're right. There's that biasness in me. Yeah. whenever you see someone with dreads, you're like, yeah.
I feel like we as African, we have a lot of things to overcome. And I think part of that could be the trauma you mentioned with colonialism. It gets transferred from those who experience colonialism firsthand. They pass it on, the same trauma, to the generation following. Even not only us, I think even Black Americans here too, who have gone through slavery. I was talking to other ladies here and they speak of the same, like trauma being passed down. But it's a complicated topic. I think is some of these answers can be only offered by maybe people who have done research, in-depth research. Those are some of the things that linger in my mind that I question myself about some of the biases that I have.
Yeah, like one of them, actually, when we were talking about this, I just thought of one. And this has a direct economic impact.
Yes.
So we are saying that we would want an ideal situation, we would want is for the African governments to create an enabling environment for growth of industries, and for even maybe people in the diaspora or other investors to come and start these industries. But I think there's usually a bias in most of us Africans. It's like we don't like our own products.
Yes.
So think of like you have gone to the store.
Yes.
You're back home in Africa and you see a laptop. And the laptop is written maybe made in Kenya.
Yes.
And there's another one made in Germany. I still feel like most people will opt to go for the German one.
Yeah. Totally agree with you.
Yeah.
I totally agree with you. I think they will go for the German one, the made in American one.
Yes.
Yes. We lack the pride. We don't pride in our own creativity enough. Or the people who are creative within our midst.
Yes.
Yeah. And even that's why I was listening to another podcast and they were saying that in Kenya, so if it's a startup, you want to get funding, you have to get a white guy to be part of your team so that a bank in Kenya can finance you. Because the picture of a white person in that, it makes it more authentic. It's so sad.
Crazy.
It's so sad, yeah.
So you're saying, so if you go, they won't even look at the idea.
Yeah.
It's not even about the idea.
It's not even about the idea.
It doesn't matter even if you are inventing the next money transfer system, like the M-Pesa that's really popular in Kenya. As long as the face value, you have a backing that's American or...
Yeah.
Wow. And these are banks in Africa.
These are banks in Africa who are manned by Africans.
So me as an African, they are the bank. Like I'm thinking like the loan approval officer. I'd rather, when I see people with my own background, my own people, I will be like more hesitant to approve it.
Yes, to approve it.
Until I see somebody who's way different from me.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a problem right there.
It's a big problem. It's a big problem. I listened to that and I was like, wow, we got a long way to go if that's the case.
Yes.
We got a long way. I also believe when I was in the engineering, we were saying, in the first class, they taught us that as an engineer, you don't reinvent the wheel. So if something has already been created, don't try to create again. So basically, I guess the meaning is like building to what other people have invented and building from that. Either you can advance it, but just don't recreate it again. But I've also wondered if there's anything like African technology, whereby you can use the African mind to create a technology. It may not be necessarily anything related to the West, but just an African brand of some sort. Because I feel like the Americans, the Europeans, their technology has grown from industrial period all the way in different generations to what we have today. And so when today we are trying to adopt what they have, but these things, we can connect all the other pieces going backwards because some of they are interconnected in the knowledge. And
that's a really good point, because when you're developing like technology, it needs to, one, there's the environmental factor. Like a technology can work really well in a specific environment and fail terribly in a different environment. So you're so right. As Africans, is there a way that we can develop solutions to our own unique challenges in our own way? Yeah. That's a really good point, because you just can't take solutions from elsewhere, bring them to African, try to use them to solve African problems.
Yes.
It won't work.
It won't work. It won't work. And every time Americans design an equipment or technology, so as the Europeans, they are putting that to solve their problems, not other people's problems. Yes, in a way, it may end up solving other people's problems, but it probably won't be as effective. Let's talk like something like AI. And there's a AI that is designed to make music. Most likely, if it's designed in America, they're going to be taught to make American beats.
Oh, yeah. It can't make any of the Africans. Yeah.
Yes, they can make the Lingala or the Rumba.
Yes.
But if, let's say, Africans designing their own AI, it will be taught to solve African problems.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, we got to have like African technology.
Yes.
And not rely on Western. Yes, it can be Western, but it's strict to fit African.
Yes. So even going back to the point of us as people in the diaspora going back, for some of us, if we feel called upon to go back to solve some of the problems we're having in our motherland. It's not a matter of just saying that, oh, this solution I saw here, and then you just go and try to implement the same thing.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. Because like there's one company, a friend of mine back in Kenya, Nairobi, he works for a logistics company.
Yes.
It's owned by a lady who came to the States as a student, later got employed here, lived for about 10 years, then went back to Kenya. She started a logistics company. And I think it's following some of the model of FedEx.
Yes.
FedEx here. But yeah, my friend was telling me that she's facing a lot of challenges where she's trying to implement a very similar thing in Kenya, which is really impossible.
Yes.
Because one of the things in the States is the addressing system is well organized here.
Very organized.
Yeah. Like from house to house, you can give somebody your house number and using the road and the house number, and using that they can follow and get to where you are.
Yes.
Yeah. But I feel like at least in Kenya, what I know is most of the areas, the addressing has still not been set up well. But anyway, so that's a logistical issue when she's trying now to implement the same thing like FedEx.
Yeah.
In Africa.
Transferring American technology to Africa. It can be transferred, but it has to be an African way. The fact that our address system is not as American, and even it's not there, then developing something actually that works for the Africans.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which I think maybe innovation, like driving that, because we have a lot of very sharp people back home. Like,
oh, yes.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I think that would be a good thing. And I feel like we really drifted from the topic. But
we really have.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think anytime we start talking about like our economy and it's just...
It's like it can go anywhere because we are just passionate about...
Yes. A bunny trail that will never come to an end.
Yeah. I think it's just because we want to see a better Africa. Because if Africa succeeds, believe me, we're also successful.
Yes.
And so, yeah, that's why. For that road, you can get to the end.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, you think we have exhausted everything we wanted to talk about today?
Maybe you can talk a little bit about, I think we touched on it. So yeah, I was going to talk about like the comparison between the Christian experience between, back in Africa and here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like once in a while we also touched on it, but I don't know.
Yeah, we can a little bit more. Definitely,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's do it. So, do you mean like in terms of in the ways that our experiences and how different they are, or?
Yeah, maybe something like that. So even it can be from services, right? How the services run. Do you feel like it's the same? Of course it can be the same, but is the difference really huge during the services? The style of preaching,
yes,
the style of worship can even be the Christians themselves.
Yes,
in terms of even the demographic. Like for most of the churches, when you go here, is the demographic the same? Do you see a lot of youth or elderly or?
I would say, just to kick off things, I would say, especially when I came to the United States, when I was in Kenya in high school, that's when I started like really committing my life to the Christian life. And I knew the way of Christian to live is it's this path whereby you have to distinguish yourself from other people. People have to know, like, you are a Christian. You can be found in certain corners. You know what I mean? But when I came to America, it was like completely different. It was hard for me to distinguish between a Christian and atheist.
Yes.
It was hard to distinguish a Christian and a drunkard because they all go to the bars.
Yes.
And they're all drinking alcohol, which was like a taboo in my case. You may find people smoking outside the church. And so this was one of the actually shocking differences we see in a church is on a regular day, or people could just come after church, they go to the bar and go and drink.
Yeah, that's unheard of in back home, yeah.
Yes. No other like my present worship leader holding a huge beer.
Yeah, that's unheard of.
Yeah,
back home. And I think tied to that, like for me, one difference that I also saw is in the workplace, if you are a Christian, you're expected to not profess it. You're not expected to talk a lot about your faith.
Yeah.
You have to like maintain, especially in the corporate world, like it's frowned upon when you're really talking a lot about your belief in Christ, or you have to really not talk a lot about it unless you are really high level. Oh yeah, on Sunday I went to church, but you really don't want to dive into it. Yeah, so I think that was a shock for me because back home, like person who is a Christian, from the very first time you meet them, they tell you, and I love Christ as my personal savior.
Yeah. You confess it.
Yes. That it's a foreign thing over here.
Yes, completely foreign. It was a foreign thing completely. Yeah, and you mentioned this earlier on, but also the length of the services too. At home, like the services were really long. And I don't necessarily advocate for it. Because some of these people will, at least in my church, it's like past 1 p.m. and they're still going. And you're there as a kid, the stomach is empty.
Yes.
You want to go home.
I want to go for lunch.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember how irritating it used to be. The other part was, especially if there was like a function, let's say there was maybe baptismals, maybe the opening of a project for the church. It was now the service that was normally 3 hours, you knew now it was going to be now 5 hours.
5 hours, yeah.
Because we would have all these speakers who they had to be given their own time to speak about the project. And each one of them will take half an hour.
Yeah.
I think that's very different from here.
It's very different, yeah.
Here it's more about the time. If the service in the pamphlet that they issue to the Christians, to the congregation, if the service starts at 10 and ends at 11, it will end actually at 10:55.
Yeah. I think maybe the other also difference that I've noticed is on nyumbani at home, like we do like crusades, open air preaching and open air. It was a bit. I used to see like function taking like 3 days from Friday to Sunday, or from Thursday all the way to Friday, and every evening there's like preaching, there's dancing, there's choir and all that in the marketplace. And I might have seen just a few of that in America, but it's not as pronounced as I experienced back home.
Yes. You remember some of the crusades, like you could even hear the music when you are in your house.
Yes. Miles and miles.
Yes.
Away.
Yeah. It's like they used to turn up the volume so that
the
whole neighborhood will know they're in town.
Yeah, it's like almost like the whole village.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was normal. That was the norm. Yeah, but yeah, over here it's so hard to see that. I think some of it also is the noise pollution laws over here. They're really strict on that.
Yeah,
like you have to have those concerts in like specific areas. Yeah, although I don't know though. Take that back. I've seen, and this is in Canada. I think I saw there are some street preachers who go with speakers.
The speakers, yes.
Although they once in a while they'll have like police maybe telling them like, hey, based on the message too that they are preaching. Yeah, but yeah, it's not as rampant as back home.
Yes. I've also seen some in America in the streets just preaching. They call them street preachers, but it's not as massive as you have I feel like crusade in Africa, like the whole church, like it will be like hundreds of people just in one area.
Yes.
The only maybe thing that I've seen in America is maybe like when you have like big pastors. I remember there's one name that is running away from my mind. But there used to be big preachers that will preach. And I think then maybe they used to have like big crusade in it could be like in a soccer field or something like that.
Billy Graham.
Like Billy Graham, yes.
You fill a whole stadium of 20,000 people. Yeah.
20,000 people, yeah.
And this is it the 90s or 80s?
Yes, back then,
Yeah. I feel like back then, like there was some similarities to what we have back in Africa in terms of the Western Christianity culture. Yes. There was some similarity like that one. Yeah. But yeah, these days there's a bit of a shift.
And yes, and I think the other distinct difference that I've seen also is when it comes like to offering. In the African church, the Catholic or Protestant, people will bring not just money. They can bring like produce. They can bring an animal as offering, which I think in America is mostly money.
Yeah, it would even be like a shock. Okay, can you imagine somebody bringing a goat? Yeah, people will be like, no.
Yeah.
What is this? Where did you even get this? Yes. But back home, it's very normal.
It's very normal, yeah. And I even like giving the first fruits of the produce. I saw that quite often. My mom will not let us like even roast her mince before she takes the first batch to the church.
Yes.
And so.
Yeah. That I'm trying to think of other differences, and I know there's so many of them, and it almost seems like you have to take time to purposefully think through to notice some of the differences. Because the more time you spend here, it's like you become more accustomed to the culture here, and you now see it as the new normal. But the very first time when you're coming, that's when you really get the culture shock. Wow, this is really different from what I was used to back home. Yeah. To the same church. It's mainly an African church. We probably still have some similarities, a lot of similarities to the churches back home, because most of the people that we go to services with are also Africans. But I think when we go to a mainly American church, that's when we get most of those differences.
I agree. Yeah, it's when, as you said, the first time you come in, that's when you notice this massive. Been here 8 years, 10 years, and I start like forgetting and everything starts to look normal. This was a conversation that I'm glad we did it. We touched on different topics, and I think we really tried to exhaust a lot of them. And it's good to have this conversation because back in our minds, I think we are thinking about these things.
Yes.
And just having an opportunity to express them and speak them out loud and talk about them, I think is not only like healing for us, but it does us good. It's good for us now.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Great conversations. I also learned a lot. I think, especially some of the things I didn't even know, like the catechism thing. I didn't know you'd went through that. Yeah, very great, interesting conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks for coming. And the viewers and family members, if you have not subscribed, please consider subscribing, liking, and also sharing. Your support is highly appreciated. And thanks to those who have been watching and giving me feedback on areas of improvement. I appreciate that. That's it for today. Bye-bye.